title of today's message, Celebrating Valentine's Day. It's all about love. It's really all about love. So who is this Saint Valentine anyway that people are always talking about? You know, when I was a kid, even in elementary school, we used to make up our little Valentine's cards. I'd send one to little Susie, would you be my Valentine? And, how many of you did that kind of stuff when you were in school? Do they still do that? Do kids still make little Valentine's Day cards? And they give Valentine's Day gifts? And of course, you know, it's always cute and fun, like friendship when you're in elementary school. Now, when you get in high school, you start thinking about who could be your Valentine. You start, young ladies start expecting some flowers and stuff to go with that card. Maybe a nice gift. We have Valentine's Day celebrations. And, you know, not just Christian folks, not just churches, but Valentine's Day is one of the most popular holidays of the year for buying cards and candies and flowers. In fact, isn't that like the next to Easter and Halloween, the biggest candy selling time of the year, I think? I forget. I should have looked up the statistics. They have special boxes of candies in the shape of a heart. And but where did all that come from? Why do people do that? And what amazes me is that, you know, if you ask 10 people, who was St. Valentine's Day, especially young people, they say, I don't know. I guess somebody that was about people, you know, hooking up. Because Valentine's Day is this romantic holiday where, you know, people try to couple up. In fact, so many Valentine's Day celebrations are, you know, about couples. All the couples come together. Deborah has always had a focus on making our Valentine's Day dinners for everyone. Everyone should be able to celebrate Valentine's Day, whether they're a married couple or an engaged couple or single folks, or young folks that aren't even thinking about getting married yet. We should be able to enjoy this Valentine's Day celebration. But you know, Valentine's Day, we're really celebrating an individual, a person, that we're celebrating the life of an individual. And there's so many holidays, like I said, like St. Patrick's Day and Christmas and Thanksgiving, and all these holidays are rooted in Christian tradition, Christian celebration. But they've somehow been forgotten over the years. So we'll talk about that just for a minute. Don't worry, I'm not going to spend the whole sermon talking about the individual, St. Valentine. But he was actually a bishop in the early church, a Christian. That's why we celebrate St. Valentine's Day. He was killed for his faith under the Emperor Claudius II. He was martyred in the year 269 AD. How long ago was that? Anybody do the math on that? I think it was 1,751 years ago. I really am that good. No, I'm kidding. About 1,700 years ago, there was this Christian, and he became well known for his faith. When he was under house arrest at one point, under Claudius II. Claudius II was a persecutor of Christians. He greatly persecuted the church, the emperor, the Roman emperor, and they were fighting a lot of wars at that time. Christians had a rough way to go. It wasn't very popular to be a Christian, as it is in so many places in the world today. But while he was under house arrest of Judge Asterius, and he was discussing his faith with this judge, Valentine was discussing the validity of Jesus. And this judge decided to put St. Valentine to the test and brought to him his adopted blind daughter. If Valentine succeeded in restoring the girl's sight, the story goes, this judge would do whatever he asked. And St. Valentine prayed to God and laid his hands on her eyes and God restored her vision. She was immediately healed. And this judge became so humbled by this, he asked St. Valentine what he should do. And St. Valentine told him that he should get rid of all those idols in his house, get rid of all of the things that separated him from God, and that he should become a Christian himself and be baptized into the faith and serve Jesus. And so the judge obeyed, and he did exactly what St. Valentine did, or told him to do. He became a Christian. Over 40 people in his household and his employees got saved, and he released all of the Christians that were imprisoned under his authority at that time. And Valentine became pretty well known as a result of this great miracle that happened there. Became very well known in that area and throughout the empire. Later on, though, and this is where a lot of our tradition come from. Without the first miracle, though, the second one, the second part of the story may not have become even known as much. But later on, St. Valentine was arrested again, this time for marrying Christian couples. You see, as the story goes, the emperor Claudius had made a rule, a law, that the young men of military age were not allowed to marry. He felt like that when people got married, they didn't make very good soldiers. They started worrying more about how they could stay alive to get home to their families, more about taking care of their children and their wives than they were worried about winning the war for the emperor. So he made a rule, a law, that people, young men of certain ages, couldn't be married. And what Valentine would do was he'd marry them anyway, in violation of the emperor's order. He would help Christians in every way he could. And now this marrying thing wasn't the only thing he did to help Christians. Christians were greatly being persecuted. So he provided relief and help to his Christian brothers and sisters in any way he could through his faith in God. But this thing about marriage in particular is interesting to me because the crime that he committed was, and the thing that his life was about, wasn't about just hooking up random couples so people could have a romantic night out. It was about people were already hooking up. Young men were still doing the things that married couples should do with their dates, but they weren't getting married, and so they were living in sin. And St. Valentine loved God, and he loved these people, and so what he did wasn't trying to find single people and bring them together, but he was finding people who were already coming together and trying to bring them into a loving commitment for life through holy matrimony, through marriage. I don't know why St. Valentine's Day has become so much a celebration of dating as it should be a celebration of marriage. It should be a celebration of lifelong commitments between a man and a woman, where the two become one flesh until death do them part, where they make a commitment based on real love. So it's really about love. So when he was arrested the second time for continuing to evangelize, continuing to lead people to Jesus, continuing to lead people to this faith, this time he was brought to the emperor himself, Claudius Gothicus, who's known as Claudius II. And Claudius actually liked St. Valentine's. You know, Christians should be likable. There's so many Christians that, well, I better stop there. But we should be likable. Well, Claudius II wasn't even a Christian. In fact, he was a pretty wicked emperor, but he liked St. Valentine's. They became sort of friends until, and boy, I'll tell you what, this will try some of your relationships. Claudius took a liking to Valentine until he tried to convince Claudius to embrace Christianity. He tried, can you imagine the audacity of that guy? He tried to convert the emperor himself to Christianity, to convince him to set aside his idols and his sin and become a Christian. And like so often is the case today, he went from liking him to not liking him real fast. Whereupon he refused to become a Christian and condemned St. Valentine to death, commanding that he either renounce his faith in Jesus or he would be beaten with clubs and beheaded. St. Valentine refused, and Claudius commanded that he would to be executed outside of Flaminian Gate on February the 14th in the year 269. So what we're celebrating on St. Valentine's Day is really the life and the martyrdom of this great saint, this great man of God who lived his faith and was faithful even unto death. And his motivation in doing this, his motivation was to help Christians and to especially help couples in love. Help them by marrying them so that they would not continue in sin. There isn't enough talk about that today in the church. It's become unpopular, you know. There are so many couples that'll just, hook up. Actually, we've actually reached the point where nearly half of all the births are out of wedlock. In a lot of countries, in a lot of cultures, it's even more. It's even more, far more. But he was motivated by love, this genuine love. Genuine love leads to genuine commitment. Love for God, love for God's ways, love for God's people, and he loved them even to his own death. So let's talk about this love thing for a minute. What is love? This word, love. Love is actually the foundation of Christianity. Without love, there could be no salvation, if you think about it. If you really think about it, if there wasn't this thing called love, no one could be saved. See, God, who was reading that a minute ago? Oh, it was on his shirt, Tobias, we were talking about. John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever should believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. It was love that caused God to send his only Son, his only begotten Son, into the world. It was love that caused Jesus to be willing to endure such contradiction of sinners against himself. It was love. Apart from love, we cannot know God. How many of you want to know God? That is the end, or ought to be the end of everything, that we can know him. That's what Paul said. He said he gave up so many things. He gave up his fame and his fortune and all of the things that were credited to him. He said, all the things that were gained to me, I counted loss for Christ. Yea, doubtless count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I've suffered the loss of all things and count them but rubbish, that I may know him. Hallelujah. But apart from love, we cannot know him. 1 John chapter 4, verse 8 says this, he who does not love does not know God, for God is love. All of the law and the commandments hang on this word called love. There was a young man that asked Jesus, I think it's recorded in Matthew chapter 22. Young man asked Jesus, what is the great commandment? What is the greatest commandment? Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your understanding. And he said, this is the first and great commandment. And the second one is just like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. That's what Jesus said. He said everything, all the laws, all the rules, all that God wants or expects or requires from us hang on these two very simple commands. Love the Lord your God. Love him with everything in you. Love him with your heart, with your mind, with your soul, with your strength. Love God. But also, love each other. How much should we love each other? As much as you love yourself. As much as you love yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. I've heard some people say that's why a lot of people don't show a lot of love, because they don't have much love for yourself. Well, we need to work on that. Then I've seen people try to fix that by becoming selfish. That's not the way to work on that. So, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you get the first one right, it becomes a whole lot easier to get the second one right. If we love God with all of our mind and all of our strength, how can I not love who he loves? And he loves you. He really loves you. He loves you so much, he sent his only begotten Son to die in your place. He loves you so much. He left heaven behind. Considered it not being in the very form of God, considered it not something to be held on to, but laid it all aside and came in the form of a servant. That's love, my friends. Greater love has no man than this, that he would lay down his life for his friends. Jesus said, that's love. All of the good things in the world are nothing without love. You ever think about that? What good would all of the world be for you if you don't have love? All the religious works in the world, all the religious things. The Pharisees, they were some really religious people back in Jesus' time. And we got some Pharisees in the world today. We just don't call them Pharisees. They fill a lot of churches across the country. Hopefully not this one, but we got to watch ourselves too, Oh my, it's easy to become like that. They were so caught up in their religious traditions, their religious rituals, their keeping of the laws. You can put the 10 Commandments all over your house, and you can put Bible scriptures on every tabletop and picture frame. But if you don't love, it's all useless. And if you don't know love, if you don't know God, if you don't love him and love his people, what good are all of the religious works? Paul said this about it. He said, if I had all faith so that I understood all the mysteries, if I had all the wisdom, that I could understand every wisdom, and I had so much faith that I could move mountains, and I had so much, he said, if I gave so much, all of my goods, if I gave it all away, and I even gave my body to be burned, but I don't have love, it's useless. All of those religious works, he said, without love are just useless. This love. Wisdom and money will fail without love. Consider some of the examples in the world. There are so many miserable people in the world who are very, very wealthy. Lots and lots of people who have more money than you'll ever see in your lifetime. Well, I read a story of one lady not too many years back who was so wealthy. She owned huge hotel chains and millions and millions of dollars. But she was so unhappy that when she died, she left her entire estate to her dogs. Actually put it in her will. She couldn't find one person that she loved. She wanted no one to get her stuff, her things. How miserable would it be to live like that? What an empty life. I've read of reclusive billionaires who had big companies and thousands of employees, but lived inside of dark rooms and sheltered from people because they have not love. So many wealthy people have committed suicide just like poor people. So many wealthy people try to fill the void in their life with relationships, with things that they can afford. and deep down are so unhappy. But poor people are also miserable if they don't have love. So many poor people, so many people stuck in poverty are just as miserable because they don't have love in their life. I'm not talking about sensual love. I'm talking about genuine, Christ-centered love. So many people mistake love for lust. They mistake love for the momentary feelings of pleasure that come from coming together. And then they're so disappointed when that doesn't result in love. So disappointed when those momentary feelings pass and there's an emptiness. So many people confuse love with companionship. Just come together with this person and then they're gone. Still others define love by what's in it for themselves. Whether you're rich or poor, if your love is defined by what's in it for you, by how you feel or what you get out of it, your love will probably be pretty shallow. But whether you're rich or poor, no one who lives in love is stuck in despair. There are so many people, so many examples of people without wealth, without power, who are filled with love and life. I remember my grandmother. Deborah remembers Grandma Ramey. My dear, sweet grandmother Ramey. She was actually my grandmother by marriage. She married my grandfather when they were in their 50s. And they were poor. They were really poor, lived down in southern Ohio. Grandpa had an outhouse till I was 14, I think. And when he could finally put plumbing in the house, they couldn't afford a septic system, but their house, they just had this little tiny lot, and the house sat right on the bank of a creek. So they just piped it out into the creek, And, I remember I was outside in the backyard one time when someone went, and I saw some floaties. I said, "What in the world?" It's a true story. They didn't have a lot of money. They just their house. In fact, they had little stove. They call it a stove, a fuel oil stove that sat in the middle of the house. I don't know if any of you have seen that kind of heating system. It sat right there in the front room, and because they didn't have a furnace, they didn't have ductwork that could take the heat. So if you'd go down there in the wintertime, if you was in the front room, you was warm. I mean to tell you, you was toasty warm. But if you was in any of the other rooms, you better bring a sweater. It was they just didn't have a lot of money. But I want to tell you, Grandma, that woman was so filled with love. Her life was filled with purpose and joy. She loved her husband. She loved my grandpa. Probably more than I've ever seen a person love another person. It was just amazing to see those two together. They called them the little lovebirds. They were like that all the way till Grandpa went on to be with Jesus. He got dementia, and she just grieved and grieved. She grieved for many, many years. But whenever she was around anybody, she had the capacity to genuinely love. And in that love, she found happiness and joy, not in wealth or in fame. Think about Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, when she died, had less than $100 in the bank, I think. I think I read that somewhere. But her whole life was a record of love, genuine love, purpose, fulfillment. Why, she'd even met presidents and addressed Congress and places like that, and spread her influence throughout the world without wealth, just based on this capacity to love. So what is this love, this thing that we're talking about? It's not an act that's performed by people for momentary pleasure. That's not love. People don't get together and make love. They might say that they do, but the truth of the matter is, if they have not already made a commitment of love through marriage, then all they're really making is sin. They're getting together to make sin. Now people come together to make sin all the time, but when they come together for the right way, they've already made love. They did it at the altar when they made that commitment. No, it's not this momentary act. That's not love. Love's not the feeling that you have toward a new pair of shoes or a new car. Oh, I love my new car, Deborah said. Oh, William, I love my new car. I don't even know she doesn't really love that car. She might like it quite a bit, but you can't really have much of a relationship with a car. Now, my computer, on the other hand, well, then might be a different story. But love isn't really this feeling you have toward the things that you like or that you enjoy. Love, when it really is love, is so much more. The Bible tells us, as we just read, that God is love. God is love. God embodies the very essence and all of the attributes of what love is. He is the living and the eternal expression of love. God is love. You can't know God without love. You can't reach God without love. We also can't be accepted by God without love. So what are some of the attributes of love? Love, like anything else that we can describe, has attributes, how we can arrange it. You know, I like this in the King James Version of the Bible. Well, all the versions, we often refer to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 as the love chapter. Love is patient. Love is kind. You know, the first time I read that, though, I was reading the King James Version, and it doesn't even use the word love there. Now, the Greek word that's translated as love is the word agape. Agape. But in the King James English that was translated in 1611, they translate that word as charity. I bet you didn't know that, did you? The word agape in the King James Version is most often translated as charity. Because charity, true charity, is really the deepest expression of love. That agape word is the deepest expression of love. Charity, it means self-sacrificing love, sacrificial love. The kind of love that says, not me first, the opposite of me first. The opposite of selfish love. There is some selfish love, but that's not really love. So this word, this agape word, this love is what? Well, some of the attributes of love, and it starts with love is patient. My wife is always telling me that I need to have patience. And I always say, honey, if I wanted to have patience, I would have been a doctor. So she says, be patient. And I said, if I wanted to be a patient, I'd go to the doctor. I have so much trouble in that area, but love is patient. My goodness. It's very easy for us to forget, once we get saved, just how long the Lord was patient with us. Have you ever looked down on somebody in their sin and been so disgusted with them? I sure have. In fact, sin should offend us. It's supposed to offend us once we come to know God. But just because I'm offended by someone's sin doesn't mean I need to get all high and mighty and lose my patience for that person. I was once lost in sin for a good many years. And God was so patient with me. Oh, he could have destroyed me in a moment, but he kept showing his love. In fact, the Bible says of God, all day long, I've stretched out my hand to a disobedient and rebellious people. All day long, he stretches out his arms, saying, come, come. To those disobedient, rebellious people, love is patient, very patient. In fact, why hasn't Jesus come back yet? The Bible tells us that he will come like a thief in the night. And he hasn't forgotten his promise to return. There's a day when he's going to return, and there's no more chances for everyone, a day in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise. But the Bible says that he's very patient, not willing that any should perish, but waiting for all people to come to repentance. Love is patient. Love can wait a little longer on that lost friend, brother, sister, that person that just rubs you the wrong way. Can we be patient? Love is also kind. Have you ever considered God's kindness toward you while he's patiently waiting? Not just waiting for you to get saved. You know, when I got saved, I used to smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a day, and I used to drink I've told you that many times, I'd get a 12-pack of beer every night on the way home from work. Now, I was a dignified drunk. I wouldn't drink at work. I waited until I got on my way home, about 5 o'clock every night. I used to use the language. I want to tell you, I could make a sailor blush. Some of the language that I would use. And I thought that when I got saved, boy, I changed all that. It just seemed like almost overnight. I just changed all that. And so now I'm there, right? And then I found out that's really just the beginning of Christianity. Yes. That's really just the beginning. And God was so kind as he waited for me to go below the surface of all. That's just the surface stuff. That's the obvious stuff, the stuff that everybody really just needs to kind of, straighten that up. But now we got to work on our kindness. Jesus reminds us that he's kind to the unthankful and to the evil. It tells us in Luke chapter 6. I remember one day I was so frustrated with someone early in my Christianity, and I have this sequential Bible reading. I read through the Bible. I try to get through the Bible once a year, every year. I just read, in order, and I keep track of my progress so I don't lose track. And I just happened to be in Luke, and I was so frustrated with this wicked person who just really, I don't know how lightning didn't strike when they walked out of the house. They were so wicked. And I was reading, and I was reading Luke chapter 6, and it says that God there is kind to the unthankful and to the evil. My goodness, he can still be kind. Now, if God can be kind to the lost, why should I be rude? Why should we be rude? And I catch myself stumbling in this very area. I'll just be very transparent. I catch myself struggling in this very area so often. Because I want to tell you, I got a tongue that is sharper than a razor when I want it to be. Come on, honey. Notice how quick my wife's agreeing with me? I'm teasing you. All of us. Oh, my. It's so easy to do, but love is kind. Love is kind even to the unthankful and to the evil. Love is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not promote itself. Pride is an opposite of love. Self-promotion isn't love. I don't got to pull my chain all the time. True love is always secure and doesn't need to puff itself up. If I really love you, I don't need to puff myself up above you, and I can trust that God really loves me. Love doesn't envy, and it doesn't have to always be the center stage. It doesn't always have to be the one being recognized. It doesn't promote itself. It's not worried about its own rights. Love is not rude. This is almost sort of being kind. The Bible tells us love is kind, and it tells us what's the opposite of kindness. It tells us what love is. It also tells us what it's not. It's not rude. Now, it's true that sometimes people can take political correctness to a ridiculous extreme, but that's no excuse to be rude. We don't have to be rude, and when you recognize consistent rudeness, That's not love. And if it's not love, my friends, it's not Christ. Because God is love. Love is not rude. We can speak the truth in love, even when we disagree with people. We can speak the truth. We've got to come as Christians. We ought to know how to come to a place where we can speak the truth, but do it in love. I should be able to express my disagreement with you without not loving you, without being rude to you, without being unkind to you. Even, and by you, I don't just mean the group that's here in this room that mostly agree with me. Maybe the people watching online. Maybe the people out there that don't agree with me. Some people may vehemently disagree with me. Love is not rude. Love does not seek its own way. So I guess Burger King is not love. Huh. Have it your way at Burger King. Love doesn't seek its own way. Think about that for a minute. Why do we always want our own way? I mean, why is that? Why do we always want our own way? We think it's going to feel good, but it so often doesn't. It's sort of like a drug. It just makes us want our own way again. Give somebody their own way all the time. After a while, they think they got it coming. I kid you not. You buy somebody lunch every once in a while, they'll thank you and appreciate it. You buy them lunch every day for a month and then don't buy them lunch. I thought you were a Christian. That's true. I could tell you some stories about that. But love doesn't have to get its own way. We always want our own way. But love wants it God's way. And you know, if we really do love God with all of our heart and all of our soul, why do we want our way more than God's way? Why do we approach situations so often with our list of what we want instead of first saying, what do you suppose God would want? One of the things I try to teach people when we're in our leadership classes and stuff, or counsel, is the best way to resolve situations, the best way to get through it is just take yourself out of the equation. Look at it from God's perspective. What would God want here? Because, you know, God is the only one that's really fair. I'm not fair. I might try to be fair, but I'm really not. I have an agenda like anyone else, and so do you. I always want my way just like you want your way. But if I can take myself out of it for a minute and say, what would God want? Because God, His way is the only one that really loves you and me equally. His way is the only one where everyone really can win in love. Love doesn't try to seek its own way. Love is not easily provoked. Aren't you glad that God isn't easily provoked? I mean, could you imagine if God woke up in a bad mood? I'm telling you. I'm just so glad that doesn't happen. God woke up in a bad mood today, the whole earth would shake. How many people would die? I'm glad God doesn't have moods. Yeah. No, He's not easy to provoke. In fact, it says that the opposite of God. It says that He's very merciful, slow to anger, slow to wrath. And we're supposed to be slow to anger, slow to wrath. It should be hard to provoke a Christian. I'm so glad Jesus doesn't have bad moods. Love is difficult to provoke. Yes, you can provoke God. You can provoke people, even Christians. But I want to ask you this before I move on to the next point. Are you easy to provoke? Do you have a hair trigger? Are you one of those people that have a bad disposition? You're grouchy. People step on your toes. You let them know. Does everybody know who? Don't tread on me. Don't tread on me. I bite back. Are you one of those people that are people afraid to approach you because you're so grouchy, or you're going to bite their head off if they say the wrong thing, if they step on the landmine? If so, I want to tell you, friend, that's not love. Love is hard to provoke. I want to be, now I don't always get this right, but I'll tell you what I want to be. I want to be hard. If you're trying to make me mad, I want you to have to really work at it. I mean, I want to be, I used to use this term, I need to get back to it. I used to use this term, I'd say I want to be deliberately naive. Somebody would try to say some subtle insult to get under my skin, and I'd just be so naive that I just wouldn't even catch it. I don't have to take note of that. I don't have to be provoked. I want to make it so hard that you just got to stand up and use a curse word or something. Love is not easily provoked. And if you'll start doing that, maybe somebody had a bad day or something and was trying to provoke you, but so often they'll see that you're responding in love, and they'll turn that down and respond in love also. It's pretty easy to crank up a dispute, but it takes love to put them out. Love. Then it says, love thinks no evil. Well, that's a tough one, especially when we're Christians. We're Christians. We so often see more evil than we did when we weren't Christians. We see it in everyone, everywhere. What if we started seeing the good in people? If I see all of your faults, after a while they would call me a fault finder, wouldn't they? But it takes love. It takes love to see the good, even when it's not apparent. It takes love to look beyond. I've used this analogy before, but I'll use it again. In the gold mines all around the world, you can profitably mine for gold, even if there's as little as something like 1 gram of gold in a ton of rock. Just as little as 1 gram in a ton of rock. Something like that. Or half a gram. I think it's half a gram you can mine profitably. But to be visible, there has to be like 5 times that much gold in order to be visible to the naked eye. So what that tells me is that most of the gold mines that are operating all over the world, where they're mining, they're digging for gold, they're bringing in billions, literally billions of dollars of manpower and equipment to dig for this gold. And if you would go look at it, you couldn't even see the gold. You couldn't even see it. It's not even visible to the naked eye. You got to have special equipment just to see it. But we all know how valuable gold is, right? How many of you'd like to have a few grams of gold? It's very, very valuable. But these guys will come into a place where you can't even see it. And they'll spend billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars, and bring in the most sophisticated, very best equipment that money can buy, and start moving all this dirt and rock, millions of pounds of dirt and rock, to get to this gold because they know it's there. We should be like that with people. Instead of seeing all the dirt and rock, we should know that there's some gold in those their hearts. There's some gold in those their hearts, and it's going to take our love to see it. Love doesn't think evil all the time. What if we could be like those guys digging for gold, and we could look for the gold in our fellow man and woman? Even when there's a lot of rock, there may be some stone-cold hearts, but there's gold there that's worth using the best resources that we have, the best talents and abilities that we have to get to it. Love does not rejoice in iniquity. What is iniquity? Iniquity is wrongdoing. It's evil. This is a tough one. Love does not rejoice in iniquity. Love does not rejoice. What's to rejoice? To get happy, to celebrate, right? Love does not rejoice in wrongdoing. How many of us, maybe watch it online, how many of us, calling ourselves Christians, calling ourselves lovers of God, really get entertained by iniquity. What are you watching? What are you listening to? I'll tell you what, it's hard to watch a movie now that doesn't rejoice in iniquity. You got to be looking for them. There's so much advertising, so many movies where the hero is really a villain, so many movies where they popularize every sin you can imagine, but love does not rejoice in iniquity. Movies, music, friends. Are you amused by iniquity? Are you amused by sin? Am I? Love doesn't rejoice in iniquity. Love does rejoice in the truth, though. By the way, Jesus Christ is the truth. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And this truth transcends facts. It transcends circumstances. It transcends all of the events around us. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love, what that means is love keeps going. It keeps going through all these things, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, for better or for worse. You know, those are in our marriage vows, but they really just ought to be in our Christian nature, toward not only our spouses, but toward everyone. Love, genuine love, endures all these things. Love doesn't quit. It keeps on believing good things even when bad things come. Love keeps on believing good things. It keeps on believing good about you even when you ain't looking good today or acting good today. Love sees good. And it keeps on seeing it. See, that's what we're talking about here. Love never loses hope. It hopes through all things. Love has faith. It believes. Through all things, love continues to believe. We may be having a bad moment here, but God's going to get us through it. And you're going to be part of that. I believe because I love you. Love keeps believing these good things. This is so important. Because sometimes it seems so much easier to show love based on these criteria to complete strangers than it is to show love to those in our own house. It's really easy for me to put on a perfect love suit when I come to church. I can be absolutely perfect. I can shake your hand. I can smile. I can forgive the worst sin. I can say kind things. I can find someone who's miserable in their sin, and I can look past all that dirt and find some gold. It's easy because I only have to do it for an hour. It's easy. And then I can go home and I can walk past 1,000 good things, 1,000 pieces of gold, and let me tell you, I can find some dirt. I can find something to rub me the wrong way. I can find something that wasn't the way I wanted. I can find. So many of us are like that. Now, try not to be like that. But it's so much easier to put on the facade of love for a short time on Sunday morning or when the company's over. It's so easy. But keeping this attitude day in and day out, especially with those who are closest to us, especially with those who see us when our hair is down. That takes genuine love, the real kind. So love continues. That's what this last verse is talking about. Love continues to bear all these things. Love continues to hope through all these things. Love continues to believe good through all these trials. Love never loses hope. The people closer to us, they know how to test our resolve in love. They know how to test it. And so, if our love is genuine, it should stand up to the test. It should bear all these things, believe all these things, hope in all these things, endure in all these things, because love never fails. I love that verse, verse 8 there, where 1 Corinthians chapter 13 tells us that love never fails. continue to walk in this love. Because God is love. 1 John 4:8, we talked about that. If we do not love, then we do not know God. If we live in love, then we live in God. Isn't that good news? If I will live in love, then I live in God, because God is love. Although we live in a fallen world, although there may be sin around every corner, although I may not be able to escape the results of a sinful society, I can choose to live in Christ. I can choose, as Paul said, to be lights in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. Children of God holding out this word of life and knowing that he'll rejoice in the day of Christ when he comes. We may be in a world, but we don't need to be of the world. In 1 John 4:11, and I'm going to close on this verse, 1 John 4:11 said, if God so loved us, we ought to love one another. Let's let Valentine's Day, this weekend, this celebration, be a reminder to us of love, genuine Christian love. How can we show that love in all we do? And as we're thinking about that, reflect back on these attributes of love, what the God kind of love really is. Patient and kind, not rude, not self-seeking or self-serving, but genuine love. Let us love one another. Well, God bless you. Deborah's going to come.